TV on
All right, hi everybody. Thanks for being here on a Friday. We're going to begin this lecture with wrapping up last lecture. If you watch the webcast, this part will be redundant, but I think it's nonetheless a nice thing. So as you know, we've wrapped up the core technical content of the class. That's data structures and algorithms. So today we're going to talk more about software engineering, and next week will be kind of some fun topics that I thought were fun. So to summarize the sorting and data structures part of the courses, below we will see in a moment the landscape of the sorting algorithms that we discussed over the weeks that followed spring break. So there's basically three flavors of sorts that we discussed. The first were sorts that use comparison. We spent most of our time on those. We had selection, merge, partition, and insertion sort. And we had some variants. For example, if we use a heap, we get heap sort. And we talked about how insertion sort, if you insert all of your items into a binary search tree, it turns out to be partition sort, also known as quick sort. That's one way to look at comparison sorts. We also had our integer or alphabet-based sorting algorithms. This is where we count the number of hearts, spades, diamonds, etc. And we also saw our radix sorting algorithms, which are able to sort strings of digits from an alphabet. And those require a sorting routine. So when we use LSD or MSD sort, we can use counting sort on each digit. So each of these are useful in different circumstances, of course, but actually the main reason that I taught you all this stuff was to give you different ways of thinking about problem solving. So by studying an elemental, very basic problem in many different ways, we are able to think about how to think about problems. So that's the goal. Okay. So at this point, we've wrapped up sorting, and I want to draw a little comparison before we move on to today's lecture between the sort problem and the search problem. So sorting, we know exactly what it is. It's sorting items. The search problem was retrieving data of interest. You may remember this table when I summarized the search part of the class, where we have, for example, lists that let you get back data based on its index, or a map or a set, which let you get back information based on the identity of a key, and so forth. And so there's some interesting connections between the sort and the search problem. So for example, here are shown all my data structures that we used for key identity. So I'm only doing set and map. I'm not showing lists or priority queues or disjoint sets. So we have more or less three flavors of maps as well. So tries, for example, turns out if you think about what those are all about, they're kind of like radix sorting, right? It's digit by digit. And we can actually draw similar comparisons with our other types. So we'll bring back our little map. And I will say that our comparison-based sorting algorithms are our integer sorting algorithms and our radix sorting algorithms are basically some rough analog of these different ways of approaching search. I think it's kind of a neat thing. So because 2-3 trees and red-black trees and their cousins, because they use comparisons, we could think of them about them as some kind of, like there's a connection. They're both comparison-based. I think it's kind of fun. Integer sorting, it's not as clear of a connection, but in some ways it's kind of like a hash table in the sense that you're exploiting space in this funny way in order to save time, and you end up getting this constant runtime. Now with hashing, it's a little messier than what we saw done here, so it's only roughly analogous, but I think it's a nice picture to have in mind. Okay. All right, so that's sorting, that's searching, and in a way, that's most of what we did for the last 9 weeks. Not everything, right? We don't talk about priority queues on this slide. Okay. So there's plenty more to explore. We're closing the doors now on this stuff, but if you find this stuff really interesting, there's lots more to try and understand. And maybe not a bad idea when you're trying to study for the final. Just think about what are some interesting ways to mix and match these ideas. So I've just given a few little questions you might ask yourself, as you're falling asleep or whatever. Like, what if we use something else as a subroutine? Like, could we somehow use quick sort or merge sort or something instead of counting sort as a subroutine? That is, quick sort by each digit. What would that be? We could ask ourselves, well, since we have this notion that if we implement comparable, then we can store things in a red-black tree And we can also comparison sort, right? Like the existence of a compare to method makes it possible to use these data structures and to run these algorithms. So for example, you could not use, if you're trying to organize a bunch of, I don't know, pictures, they probably don't have a compare to method. But once you've added a compare to method, well, then you could build a 2-3 tree of pictures and sort them using merge sort. So what would be the equivalent interface? Like what would be the magic interface or function you would need to implement in order to make it tries work with any data or with any type? Or if we wanted to build a count or a radix sort that works with any type. Like what would be the interface that unlocks these pieces, tries and radix sorting? Maybe a fun question. Or let's say, what if something has both digits and it is comparable? Could we somehow, for example, this question may be totally meaningless. I don't know, but throwing it out there. Could we somehow use a left-leaning red-black tree to improve radix sort if we know that it's composed of digits and each item is comparable? I don't know. And so I think a lot of fruitful questions, particularly in trying to really press your understanding, can be posed, and you can learn a lot from them. All right. That's just wrapping up things. Okay. Wanted to say it because I think this picture is pretty interesting, just to keep in mind, to draw some connections. Any questions before we move on to the main topic of our day? Okay. So let's do it. All right. So announcements-wise, we're thinking about having an RRR week review session. So let us know what you think. There's a poll here that I'll also put on Piazza, but it's tinyurl.com/61B RRR poll. Okay. And the other thing I wanted to mention is that for project phase 2, when you're trying to save, there's basically 2 ways to do it. Just want to bring this up while you're here. One is to use serializable, which is not described in the spec, but we do give a save demo. And another approach is just, well, one way to save the world is just save the input string. And then when you load, you could basically, there's one way to do it, use interact with input string on what someone already did, and then hand control over interact with keyboard if you're trying to use it live, something like that. Because if your world's deterministic, which it should be based on the rules, if your world is always doing the same thing based on the seed, then if you just replay the same input that someone typed in, it should work fine. So just throwing out there, both of those approaches, I've heard people talk about them. They're both fully reasonable. I actually prefer the second approach, but you might find the first one more interesting. And lastly, be really careful about non-final static variables. There was a post on Piazza, which we all found somewhat amusing, where someone had a problem, and then they had their own update to their own problem, which said, if this is your error, make sure your functions aren't static. I think they meant variables, by the way. But anyway, just like they said, if you use static things, everything breaks. So I would basically not have static variables at all, except maybe a static random, because it's very easy to have subtle bugs, because you have all this different code that can all manipulate. There's like one piece of data that every function can look at and touch, and if you make any mistakes anywhere, you'll run into trouble. Now, quick note that if you use serializable, that's one of the 2 ways to save, then static variables will cause you even more trouble because those are not saved. Okay, any questions about this? Yeah.
So basically, like when we make the bugs, like it's saying spec, don't use non-static variables.
Don't use static variables. Yeah. Don't use non-final static variables. Yes, just because it's hard to keep track of what you're doing. That's the main reason. All right. Okay. Moving on then. So we're going to start today by talking about technology. So I was born in 1981. I had a computer when I was really young, and I saw the internet come to be, more or less. I mean, it existed even when I was a baby, but it wasn't always there. Like, you guys were born into the internet, but I merely adopted it. So that gives me a different perspective. This is the video from the Today Show in 1994, in which adults of the time are trying to understand internet. Okay, here we go.
I wasn't prepared to translate that as I was doing that little tease.
Oh, that's
that little
right.
mark with the A and then the ring around it.
At?
See, that's what I said.
Mm-hmm.
Katie said she thought it was about.
Yeah. Oh.
But I'd never heard it.
Around.
I'd never heard it said. I'd always seen the mark, but never heard it said. And then it sounded stupid when I said it. Violence at NBC.
I heard be around big or about in the lunchroom the other week.
There it is. Violence at NBC. GE.com. I mean.
Well, Allison should know.
What is internet anyway?
Internet is that massive computer network, the one that's becoming really big now.
What do you mean? How does one? What do you write to it like mail?
No, a lot of people use it and communicate. I guess they can communicate with NBC writers and producers. Allison, can you explain what internet is?
No, she can't say anything in 10 seconds or less.
Oh, Allison will be in the studio shortly.
What does it
mean?
It's a giant computer network made up of started from.
Oh, I thought you were going to tell us what this was.
It's like a computer billboard.
It's not in. It's a computer billboard, but it's nationwide, and it's several universities and everything all joined together.
Right.
And others can access it.
Right.
And it's getting bigger and bigger all the time.
It came in really handy during the quake. A lot of people, that's how they were communicating out to tell family and loved ones they were okay because all the phone lines were down.
I was telling Katie, and I've been
But you don't need a phone line to operate internet?
No. Anyway, people didn't really get it. Yeah. And I saw this firsthand where when I was a freshman in high school, if you were to ask, like, who has a computer at home, this was way before smartphones, the answer, you maybe get a few people. But then by my senior year, just 4 years later, teachers were giving out websites. So that was a very fast transition. Now, you guys, in your lifetimes, I'm assuming all of you, the iPhone came out. This is a classic video that I find interesting, just as an insight into the year 2007.
It looks like.
Okay, I'm going to skip forward a little. So
I've
this
got
is
a
Steve
camera
Jobs
here so you can see
introducing
what
the
I'm doing with
iPhone.
my finger.
Okay.
And boom, I'm in the iPod. I want to get home. I push the home button right here, and I'm home. Back in the iPod. I'm back in the iPod. Now here I am. You can see 5 buttons across the bottom. Playlists, artists, songs, videos, and more. I'm in artists right now. Well, how do I scroll through my list of artists? How do I do this? I just take my finger and I scroll. That's it.
They loved it.
Isn't that cool?
Yeah, there's another
Cool
one
for a few
early on.
seconds. And let me go ahead and get that picture within picture up. I'm going to go ahead and just push the sleep-wake button. And there we go, right there. And to unlock the phone, I just take my finger and slide it across. All right, you want to see that again?
And the crowd does actually go nuts both times, not just you guys, the real ones, so you can watch that. So things have just changed a lot. And it seems silly, but actually all these technologies that today are commonplace, even like, within your lifetimes, they seem miraculous at some point. And of course, there's been all these interesting unintended consequences that have happened over time. So here's a picture that I took from a friend's Facebook wall. He took this picture, I think, with his own phone, but maybe he took it from somewhere else. He said something like, this habit has become ridiculous, or something like that. Anyway, so the game Candy Crush. Who here has played Candy Crush? Okay, a few of you guys, yeah. It's on Windows, I think, by default. So basically how it works is every day you play on your phone, you get a reward after you've gotten past a certain number of days. So you get a progress indicator. It's like, congratulations, you've played this game for 151 days. And you also get an item that makes the game more fun for like 2 hours of the game. And if you play more than that, your bonus doesn't work anymore. And if you miss a day, your counter resets, and you don't get your bonuses, and you're back to nothing. So why does this feature exist in Candy Crush? Question for you. Yeah. Charge you for slip days. Can they? What do you mean exactly? Like if you miss it, can you buy back in? Oh, you can buy back into the streak? Whoa, weird. What's another reason? Yeah, it's like one primary one. Yeah. Yeah, keep you playing the game. That's exactly right. They want to maximize engagement. More engagement. Okay, we'll come back to more about that. Okay, next. All right, Snapchat. You guys know about this thing. Anybody here have a snap streak going with anybody? Okay, cool. Let's talk about snap streaks. So if you're not familiar with this, I've never had a snap streak. But basically, if you and a friend communicate on a given day on Snapchat, Snapchat notices. It's like, good job, you guys are friends for yet another day. And it will tell you how long you have maintained communication with Katie Mulder or whatever. And it's bidirectional. If you send a message and you don't get a message back, sorry, Snap, it's over. Your streak's over. Why does this feature exist in Snapchat? What? Yeah. Yeah, so length of your longest streak. Yeah, so that's an interesting point. It has a different feeling. Why'd they do it, though? So I agree that it has a different feeling, yeah. Yeah, they want to maximize engagement. Good. That's why both of these features exist. That's the ultimate reason. There may be other things that happen, like maybe this motivates you to stay in contact with your friends, but ultimately maximizing engagement seems to me like the reason they've done this. Okay, so let's think about the positive impacts that these features have on the world. What's good about the Candy Crush bonuses or the streaks? We'll call them both streaks, okay? So what's good about the streak behavior for both of them? Give me some. Yeah. Well, no, what's good? What's good about it for, what's positive? What does it do for someone that's positive? Yeah. I like that, yeah. Easily accessible source of daily meaning. That is a really good point. I mean, that's the thing we all seek. Video games, part of it is that the goals are bite-sized. You know that scary feeling when you have a 61B project and you don't want to get started because it's just such a big burden to even begin? These things just like, boom, you don't have to think. Progress, instantly. What else? Yeah. Keeps kids off the streets. No jewel pods in the sewers or whatever. When they're doing at night. What else? Yeah. Evidence of being alive. Good, yeah. It's proof to your parents or whoever that you're alive. Proof of life. It's the phrase they use. Yeah. Oh, yeah, it does. It's a source of revenue for the people who build the tools, okay? So that's a subset of the world, but yes. What else? Keep coming. Yeah. Oh, interesting. Brings culture together. Actually, renders, that's an interesting point. How do I put that? Yeah, provides a cultural common denominator. Homogenizes us. Okay. All right, what else? Yeah. Oh, used as an alibi in case of a crime. Interesting. So that's why you buy the Candy Crush streak. Like, I couldn't have been. I was playing the game. Yeah. Yes. Encourages determination and hard work. Maybe. Sort of. Okay. I mean, it could. Probably not for most people. Yeah. Low risk way of practicing the maintenance of a long-term commitment. Okay, it's good. Maybe. It's a little silly, but I'll take it. Any others? Yeah. Yeah, it maintains contact with people you might lose track of. So I used to call my friend Sheil on the way home from surfing all the time, but then I stopped doing it. Now it'd be weird if I called him. Like, I haven't done this in 10 years, but hi. Anyway, so it's a way of just staying in contact. Okay, what are some negative things? Let's see, I'm going to go, yeah. New voice, go. Okay, I'll give you, I'll literally write that. They enslave you by tapping into your obsessive tendencies. Not necessarily as a person, but it kind of taps into your brainstem. Yeah. So it's a waste of time. Yeah, you're less productive. So waste of time, you're less productive. / bad use of time. Yep. Let's see. Have I talked to you? No. Fosters addictive personalities. So this is basically, there's a difference here, which is this one's, you aren't using your time well, and this is, it kind of makes you use time more poorly in the future. Yeah. Yeah, similarly, shortens your attention span. So it does seem like there's peer-reviewed research that suggests this is actually the case. Back. Okay. Your significant other might break up with you. Is this based on personal experience? I'm just asking. No, I mean, I don't know. You like looked up, oh, it's someone else here. Okay, it might break up with you for being lame. All right. Or whatever. Yeah. I was just trying to put words to it. And it's finished, it's getting finished, yeah. Oh, that's an interesting point. Yeah. Distracts us from more important tasks like not running over people. All right. Don't snap, streak, and drive. What else? We could be silly and serious at the same time. Yeah, go ahead. I think I heard from you. Right? Oh, sorry. Green? None. Go. Yeah, it makes our interactions more superficial, not as rich as face-to-face contact. There's a trade-off, yeah. And you had one, sorry. Oh, so yeah, it's too easy of a type of happiness, harder to enjoy things that are fun, but take more work. Yeah, I know that feeling. And I think I'll take one more from someone I haven't heard from yet, though. Yeah. You might open up the app each day because you feel you have to, rather than it is fun. Yeah, it's a false sort of meaning. Like you feel compelled to do a thing that's not necessarily like actually that fun at the end of the day. Okay. Last question. Do you feel like they're a net positive, though? So we saw there's positives and negatives. So some opinions. Does it feel like these streaks are good or bad for the world? Well, let's do a hands show. And you can we'll do who thinks that they're good overall, like they do a net positive thing for the world. That's fine. Okay. Good. Okay, who's neutral? You don't really have a strong opinion. And who's like, you think it's bad overall? Okay. So we lean bad with a standing bad. So, okay. So the point here is there's a pretty wide variety of opinions. And one thing that I always find difficult in teaching this stuff is, I have my own personal opinions, but I feel like as a person in front of a giant room like this, I have a really big responsibility to not try and tell you how the world works. So I will leave it to you to decide. And I mean, yeah, I won't say my opinion. All right. What about Snapchat and Candy Crush? Let's do the same thing. Are those features, we talked about the snap streak features, let's say they're lumped together, and I didn't anticipate it doing the hand-raising thing. So let's just do Candy Crush and then Snapchat. Okay, so Candy Crush. Is Candy Crush, is it good that it exists in the world? Who's in don't really know camp? We'll do neutral first. Okay? Who thinks it is good for the world? Like it's a better world that it exists than one which it did not exist? Okay, and who's no Candy Crush would be better if it didn't exist? Okay. All right, now let's go to Snapchat. Same thing. Neutral on Snapchat as a thing. Okay, good that Snapchat. If you don't really know what Snapchat is, you could be neutral. Good that Snapchat exists. So if you use Snapchat, this is probably you also. Maybe not. And who thinks it's bad that it exists? Okay, who thinks it's bad that it exists and you also use it? Out of curiosity. Can I get a couple comments, actually? People that think it's bad and you use it. Why? Give me like a couple. Anyone? Yeah. Ah. Got it. So the network effect keeps you there. You don't want to leave people behind, but you wish everybody would leave and go to some other place. That's a very interesting thought. Yeah. Other thoughts, if any? Yeah. Say that again? Oh, yeah. Don't want to give up my streaks. I know the feeling. Anybody ever here play Dance Dance Revolution, that game I mentioned? Anybody ever here has built up like a long, like more than 300-step combo? Anybody at that level of good? Come on. Nobody? Am I that old? 200-step combo. All right, there we go. Thank God, at least one person. Anyway, I don't want to lose my step combos either. All right, what else? One more. Someone who haven't heard from ideally too. Yeah. You don't like it, but you use it. Nope. Banned. All right. Somehow I knew. Yeah. Yeah. So it's like you have a better chance of getting information to someone using it than other ways. For me, that's texting. I guess I'm also old. But anyway, all right. Do you guys text anymore? Is that a thing? Who sends text at least once like a week? Okay, good. We're still doing it. I didn't know if everybody switched over to Snapchat or whatever. These platforms are evolving really fast. There was Yik Yak for a while. Who remembers Yik Yak, right? What happened to Yik Yak, by the way? Yeah. They made it not anonymous. So is there a new Yik Yak that's anonymous? Is there a new thing? Why not? Isn't that insane? Like, anybody could literally make Yik Yak and they would have like 200,000 users in like a month. So why hasn't it happened? No, I agree. There's a lot of bad things, but I'm just surprised nobody's gone renegade and built another Yik Yak. Anyway, just a thought. Curious. All right. Okay, let's do another one. Let's talk about Khan Academy. Just as like my foil, the opposite, right? So Khan Academy, if you're not familiar, it's a website where you can do learning. Okay. Hey, you put your mouse cursor and the thing happens. It's slowing down. Then you put it back. There it goes. Woo! The magic of learning. Wait, why did it stop? Okay, go. All right. Anyway. So Khan Academy, if you've never used it, it's really good. It has a lot of neat things where you can learn math and whatever else. It's free. You can learn about computer programming. And there's like, you can watch some videos. You can write some code. They have a pretty cool feature, by the way, that we don't have, which is if you're watching a video. I didn't know this until recently. If you're watching a video, you can stop the code at any point and then like edit it, which is insane. And you can be like, no, I want to, well, will this let me do it? Maybe not in this one, but what's this? Help. What's happening? Anyway, there's a way that you can interact with the code. Anyway, I learned about that recently. I don't know how it works. Anyway, so Khan Academy, it's a relatively small organization compared to Snapchat or Facebook. And just very briefly, like what are some good things? I only want like 2 or 3 for these. A good thing about Khan Academy. Go ahead. A positive impact. Okay, yeah, so it's access to math information you may have learned in the past and forgot. Okay, what else? More general, yeah. It's free information for everyone. Good, I like that. Okay, that's a good answer. What else? Maybe a personal anecdote. Yeah. Go ahead, yeah. Yeah, okay, sure. Anybody have a personal anecdote about a time where Khan Academy was cool for you? Yeah. What's that? Oh, yeah. It allows you to complete Math 53 to your satisfaction. Interesting. Any other personal anecdotes? Yeah. Oh, got it. So it gamifies education. Have you personally succumbed to being gamified by Khan Academy? Got it. Gamifies education. A student in 61B personally got drawn in. All right, what are some negative things? Yeah. Oh, yeah. Some teachers use it to automate themselves, and maybe they would do better if they were doing the teaching because they're in the room with you. That's a very interesting question. Good. What else? It can be abused in ways, yeah.
It's really easy to say free information for everyone, when really it's free information for everyone who can access the computer.
Got it. Not free information for everyone, just for people with easy internet access of sufficient bandwidth to watch videos, etc. Yeah. What else? You got a thought? Okay, yeah. Makes learning more passive, similar to this point above. So there's people who might use it as a substitute for a better version of education. Okay? Any others that come to mind? Yeah. Wow, that is a dark and weird answer, but okay. Dilutes the value of my fancy schmancy degree, since apparently mere peasants can just learn mathematics. All right. All right, yeah. One more. What's more? Oh, may make you overestimate your ability. I'll share an anecdote that someone shared with me, paraphrased. I learned more studying for my first 61A midterm than I had programming for years before. Okay, yeah, so may get you this sense. that you know more than you do. And then you take some midterms. You're like, oh, they're hard. Oh, you want another one? Okay, go ahead. Yeah, okay. So may homogenize teaching itself. So you think about 61B. There's no course anywhere like 61B or A, and that's partially because we poured so much of our personalities into it. Okay. Well, let's now do our other vote or question. Do you think Khan Academy is a net positive? Okay, who thinks neutral? Okay, who thinks it is a net negative for the world? Okay, who thinks Khan Academy is a net positive for the world? Okay, interesting. So question for you. Why do some people prefer working at the Candy Crush Company or Snapchat over Khan Academy? Go ahead. They pay more. That's the number one answer. Good. What else? More answers. They love candy. Unlikely. I'm not even going to put it up. Sorry. I know it's silly, but I'm going to, yeah. You heard it, though. Yeah. Yeah, more passionate about the subject. Games might be more fun, whatever, to build than educational tools. Fair point. I think it's great. We're all pulled by our sense of aesthetics. Yeah. Yep, yeah. Marquee branding for your career is a big deal. I feel it. I mean, it's like you go to a fancy school, it feels better than if you went to a less fancy school. You work at some place that has a fancy name, it feels better in some way. We're status obsessed as humans. Yeah. Yeah, more secure career, right? Khan Academy relies on donations, largely, whereas these other companies have a revenue stream. And companies that don't have a revenue stream fail. It's one of the reasons I don't personally think that capitalism is a terrible aberration upon the world, because it seems to keep funding going for things that matter. Yeah. Oh, actually, sorry. Yeah, go ahead first. Yeah. Got it. Yep. Skill sets are different. Okay. I'm going to try and get some on the wings. Yeah. Yeah, it feels too close to home for fresh engineers, perhaps. Would rather go do something else. I mean, I know the feeling, too. I've taught for a long time, and I'm like, I want to do something technical. Like, if anybody has a cool internship for me to do this summer, I'm kind of interested. I'm not even joking. So anyway, yeah, I might this summer. All right, I'll take one more if anybody has not talked yet. Who wants to do one? Okay, yeah. Yeah, different cultures. So you may go into Khan Academy and be like, I don't like that they have a dog on their list of employees. Yeah, they do. All right. So just to get some perspective, as I mentioned earlier, I mean, King and Snapchat, King is the company that produces Candy Crush. They're owned by Blizzard Activision, but they produce way more revenue. And in the case of King and Snapchat, they're both bringing in over $1 billion a year, whereas Khan Academy does $0.037 billion, which includes gifts, if you go check out the links. Now, it's interesting that even bringing in all that money and being so efficient per employee, they're still, well, I don't know if King's profitable. They probably are. But Snapchat, actually, their expenses, if I understand their balance sheet correctly, I'll admit I'm not a finance guy, but when I looked at it, as far as I can understand, they made around $1.2 billion, but then they ended up spending about double that. So they were negative this year. They're getting better. It's very expensive to run these big companies. Now, what's interesting, though, is that their revenue per employees, both companies, is very high. So for every single person that works at King, they bring in around $1 million. And that's a little bit of a hint of why they're willing to generally pay you guys well right out of school, because it really helps a lot them do what they're doing. All right. And number of employees, obviously, quite different. Khan Academy, in fact, has all their employees. You can see all the pictures and look at them, and they have a dog. But I'll leave you to find that later. All right. Great. So those are some thoughts. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about just a bigger picture. We've done kind of a tiny case study here about things you might want to do, and I will talk a little more about how one might live your life. But I want to talk about something I do in 195, the other class I sometimes teach. And this is you guys are all aware that there are some negatives, and you know there may be unintended consequences of the work you'll do. And I've noticed an interesting change in the last 7 or 8 years. So certainly around 2010, I feel like the attitude in the tech world was, oh, well, this is all great. Let's build it and see what happens. Like, we're going to build Facebook or YouTube or whatever. And it was just cool. But in the last so many years, and especially since the 2016 election, particularly because people in technology in the Bay Area tend to be very left-leaning, there was a sense of like, what have we created, right? And so there's some interesting choice quotes I brought out here, which I'll just read to you. So here's an early executive at Facebook who is well known as a critic of a lot of technology and how things are done. He says, "I think we've created tools that are ripping apart the social fabric of how society works." Who's had that vague sense? Well, I know one person, but other than who has had that vague sense out of curiosity? Okay, who knows? Okay. Another. God only knows what it's doing to our children's brains in response to Facebook. That's Sean Parker, the Napster guy. There's a technology journalist who's been covering technology for a while for the New York Times, and he says that technologies we were most excited about 10 years ago are now implicated in just about every catastrophe of the day. Justin Rosenstein, who invented the like button and also created Asana, the productivity tool, I like his quote a lot. He says, "These are our lives," quote, emphasis his, "these are our precious, finite, mortal little lives. The idea that we're spending them distracted, not accomplishing the thing that we're trying to do is just painful." It's crazy. And then there's a very interesting guy, if you go read about him. He's an early investor in a bunch of tech companies and he's also a musician, cool dude. Anyway, he said, "Facebook appeals to your lizard brain, primarily fear and anger. And with smartphones, they've got you every waking moment." So my thoughts are that I do think that technology companies inflict significant negative externalities. That is, in the same way that, fossil fuel companies, there's all this carbon that goes in the atmosphere and nobody really pays for it except for all of us. Technology companies are kind of like polluting the universe in this funny way, but it's a much more complicated type of pollution. Now, I do think that most of them are still in that positive. Like, for example, I personally use and enjoy Facebook, but obviously have a lot of concerns about the things that they do. But I am locked in because of the network effect. Plus, they got all my stuff since 2007, so I'm not going to leave. Anyway. So my personal sense, though, is that these are largely unintended consequences, that the folks building these companies, I think, are generally well-intentioned. And my gut feeling there is because you are those people. You're just younger, right? Like, the people that built all these companies were just in your place 15 years ago, 20 years ago. And I don't know, I just think of you guys as usually pretty reasonable people. Not everybody, I'm sure, right? But generally speaking, I think that people are well-intentioned. I think there are some bad actors, but I don't think that they're predominant. They're definitely out there, absolutely, and they're scary. But I do think that the workers and even executives of the companies do generally care, though it is true that money skews your perspective. And if you've never seen this happen in your life, I'm sure at some point you will have a just bizarre thing where you'll realize that your own judgment's being tainted because of the financial benefits you stand to gain, or you'll see it in other people, where it's like, how would you possibly do blah, blah, blah? A classic example is partially it's social pressure, but you scratch someone's car by accident. You're like, oh, God. And then you're like, well, I'm not going to tell them because it's me that did it. It's that kind of thing. When you are the person that's going to suffer the consequences or suffer economic impact, it just seems to, you give yourself the benefit of the doubt. So there's an interesting group known as the Center for Humane Technology. I'm just highlighting their work here because I think their mission's pretty interesting. So they were founded by former and current technology workers and executives, most famously Tristan Harris, and they're basically trying to assess and catalog the things that are going wrong and try and organize, as people are becoming a little more aware of what's going on, to organize the concerns and organize action. So in 2018, they created a ledger of harms, which is a great term. It's almost like a dystopian, Margaret Atwood type thing, It's has a nice ring to it. Anyway, their goal is to collect the negative impacts of social media and mobile tech. That's their focus. There's lots of other kinds of technology issues, but they're focusing on that. That don't show up on the balance sheets of companies, but they do show up on the balance sheet of society. And their goal is to aim rank and file engineers. Some of you guys will end up being software engineers, so you're part of the audience, who are concerned about what they're being asked to build. So in particular, they're worried about attention. This is their current list. This is the alpha list. Of course they call it an alpha because they're computer nerds. Anyway, so their concerns are attention, which is the loss of ability to focus without distraction. They're worried about mental health, loneliness, depression, stress, loss of sleep, increased risk of suicide. Relationships, which is less empathy, more confusion, and misinterpretation. Democracy, which is propaganda, lies, and the creation of these unreliable and noisy places to talk, like the hell of YouTube comment sections, for example. Children, they're worried particularly, this is a different kind of So a little orthogonal to the other concerns, but they are concerned specifically about the disproportionate impact on really young people. And for each category, if you go look at it, they provide research and citations that you can use to understand these potential harms. So attention, for example, they cite some studies that say the presence of a smartphone, even when off, can reduce cognitive capacity by taxing the attentional resources that reside at the core of both working memory capacity and fluid intelligence, which is the concept from educational psychology. So, I mean, this is a citation from peer-reviewed study. I certainly feel this. I try to just banish my phone when I don't necessarily need it. And being in work hell for the last so many weeks and, like, checking Slack all the time, like, trying to hang out with my baby yesterday was hard because I was like, I got to go check Slack. So I just left my phone in our attic bedroom, and I was like, nope, I'm not going to touch it till I go to bed. And I even try to keep my phone away from me when I sleep. Anybody had this feeling, like when your phone's near you, it's like trying to get your attention even if you're trying not to think about it? It's really the worst. It's just like, we didn't used to do that. Anyway, I don't like it. They give another example that 72% of teens feel the need to immediately respond to text, social networking messages, and other notifications. Hence the Snapchat quote someone brought up earlier. You know you'll get them. And 90% of 290 undergrads in a study reported feeling phantom vibrations on average once every 2 weeks. Who's in Phantom Vibration Club? Yeah, see? Yeah. All right, mental health. A systemic review and meta-analysis showed strong, consistent evidence of an association between bedtime access to devices and reduced sleep quantity and quality and increased daytime sleepiness. So I try to keep my phone the hell away from me when I'm sleeping. Because what if I want to know how black holes work at like 1 in the morning, which happens? I cannot have the temptation. Electronic device use is weakly correlated with teen depression and suicide, and social media use is weakly correlated with depressive symptoms. Doctors have coined the phrase, this is a little more out there, but interesting. People that are so used to seeing their social media photos being modified that some set of psychologists have created a phrase called Snapchat dysmorphia, where people just feel like they can't live up to it, and even go as far as seeking plastic surgery. Okay, so just to let you know, like a more extreme case. Obviously, most people don't do that. Relationships. So even the mere presence of smartphones can disrupt the connection between two people. That is absolutely the case. This is like your example where you were dumped for being on the Candy Crush or whatever it was. Just kidding. But yeah, I don't know if you had this feeling where you're trying to like eat with people and they're looking at their phones. It's the worst. Yeah. Back a slide? Yeah. It's not that it's just mobile devices. Could be the internet. Could be everything else. I mean, yeah, there's been distracting technologies for some time. Yeah, but they're worried about just the modern tech platforms and how they're pushing these things forward. You got it. This is another interesting one. I find that text communication often goes sour. And so they say people overestimate their ability to interpret sarcasm, humor, or sincerity. And this means people, they tend to believe they can communicate more over email. But I have found as an adult that when there's something dicey, I try and talk in person or at least by phone, because in text, it goes wrong sometimes. Democracy, another pretty interesting one. 19%-ish of total tweets from the top 50,000 users on Twitter were from bots when sampled during the final weeks of the presidential election. Search results can shift voting preferences of undecided voters by 20%. I have no idea how they quantified that, but hey. With virtually no one being aware they're being manipulated. 9 out of 10 of the fake news websites from the month before 2016 were still in the top 10 across Twitter 2 years later, meaning that people aren't learning about what's fake. I don't know how they decided what's false news. People are more likely to start believing a story if they hear it a lot. It's a pretty interesting one. So there's this known thing in psychology that if you basically think you're getting a message from many different sources, then you're more likely to believe it because it feels like the group consensus. So misinformation actors, like governments around the world, they place and promote misinformation stories, many of which appear to be from independent entities but are not. And then lastly, children. So 78% of teens check their devices at least hourly, 50% report feeling addicted to their phones, and so forth. 67% of teachers say that the number of students who are distracted is growing. Okay, that's kind of a weak statement. And then children who are cyberbullied are 3 times as more likely to engage in suicidal ideation. So there's a lot of things that can potentially go wrong. That's just a brief survey. I would encourage you guys to check this out later when you're just thinking about your future. Okay. All right, so that's the ledger of harms. I only wanted to give you a brief look at it so that you can think about it in the future, and it's something they're working on, and I think it's something pretty important to keep in mind, because now that we've seen these problems, there are people who have basically disengaged themselves from being like key players in the tech world, and are now trying to provide you with information you can use to make decisions. All right. So in terms of your life, as I mentioned before, in our software engineering lectures, the things you can build are constrained only by what you can fit in your brain. So programming, as we said before, almost pure creativity. It's your imagination and your ability to understand programs that will affect the scale of what is possible, which is crazy, okay? And so this means you are incredibly valuable and powerful people. Companies want to pay you a lot of money. A lot of you guys will try and work at these marquee companies. And just to give you a sense, for every employee that Apple hires, they're making $2 million. Microsoft, almost $1 million. Here's the profit version. And basically the point here is that the skills that you are building while you're at Berkeley are going to be in high demand. And even if you're not someone who's going to be a computer scientist or a data scientist, and you're just taking this class to supplement your education as a social scientist or whatever else you want to do, like some other science or history or whatever, these skills that you're building here, especially in this major, in this course, people are going to want you, whether they're companies, nonprofits, government agencies, like teaching institutions, whatever. And so the choice of what to do with your career is yours, and I'm not going to say you shouldn't go work at these companies. They obviously have a huge amount of impact. They have free food. I mean, there's just a lot of things that are great about them. And I don't think they're inherently evil. But I think it is something to keep in mind. But yeah, and again, actually, interesting story. I saw Ralph Nader give a speech, or give a talk at the law school. And I remember he was talking about how big corporations have basically, because they have so much money, they dominate the legal system and it's unfair to everybody else. And so someone said, how do we deal with having student loans for law school, but also fight the system? And he said, you should go work for the system for a while, make a bunch of money, and then fight the system because you've been inside of it. So even if you're somebody who's scared of these big companies, you still might find it valuable to work inside. Okay? Some 61B data you guys brought up. I'll bring more of this in next week, I think. Just because I thought it was interesting. Facebook definitely has where's Microsoft, by the way, someone asked? Oops, forgot it. Anyway. So Facebook definitely had the darkest reputation amongst you for whatever reasons. That was the least I don't think I would work there. Only 55% of you said, yes, I would do it. Google was 77, Apple 67, Amazon 60. So just a little bit of a peek at your sense of reputations. Okay. All right. So then in terms of steering the course, I just want to leave you with one last little bit. So I do think it is likely that at some point many of you will work at a technology company. And again, as I said, I don't think there's a fundamental darkness to working at these profit-driven tech companies. I mean, I am a little skeptical of it. I have a little bit of anarchist in my heart, but still, I don't know. The world's a complicated place. Anyway, I do want to mention, though, that as a rank-and-file employee, you do actually have the power to cause change, particularly if they pay you in stock, because then you partially own the company. All right, so let me just show you a couple examples. I am not passing judgment on Google's censored search engine here. I just want to talk about the facts because we don't have much time. So from 2006 to 2010, this is an example of workers having power. Google had they had a censored version of Google in China, but they closed it in 2010 because of cyber attacks and deciding they just weren't happy with how things were going and didn't feel like it was matching their mission as a company. Now, in October 2018, The Intercept published a secret project, documents about a secret project, to re-enter China and introduce a censored search engine that would allow the Chinese government to hypothetically track residents, making queries that were not good. Now, in the United States, at least, I'd say that there's more or less a strong consensus that this is not reasonable, but you may differ, particularly if you're from China. And so there were some employee responses. For example, after the leaks, something happened where the company turned off access to documents about this project, and the leadership was totally silent, and people were pretty pissed. They got angry. Their internal meme site, which is probably pretty cool, was full of talk, and people were angry. Eventually, 1,400 employees signed a letter demanding transparency, and 5 employees resigned in protest, very notably Jack Paulson, who was the senior scientist. He said there's worldwide ethical repercussions to this and wants to know what Google's ethical red lines were. He said we wrote some down, like Google had a code of conduct, but they didn't seem to be following them. He said he agreed with the case made in 2010 about why not to build the censored search engine. And he said if the anti-censorship stance is shifting, he could no longer be complicit as a shareholder and citizen. Now, ultimately, in response to all this project was totally canceled. This is a new thing. This is not how technology companies operated even 5 years ago. But this idea of worker activism is happening, and it's something I encourage you to do. All right. Another is Amazon and climate change. So a few weeks ago, this month, 6,772 employees at last count, when I looked this morning, had publicly signed a letter demanding better responses to climate change. Specifically, they said, as shareholders, we want you to adopt this resolution to spend some money studying how to adapt to and reduce the contribution to climate change. Some notes from that letter. Amazon is not a mere victim of climate change. Its operations contribute significantly to the problem. Coal powers Amazon data centers. Diesel, gasoline, and jet fuel power package delivery. Amazon has the resources and scale, absolutely gigantic, to spark the world's imagination and redefine what is possible and necessary to address the climate crisis. They noted in this New York Times article up here that like other shareholders, the employees of Amazon can file resolutions to urge a corporate change. So that's something you'll have the power to do. All right. So just to wrap up here. You're going to get so many decades on the planet, right? I don't know how many you get, but you've at least had a few. Nobody under 10, I presume. And so every week, you got these 168 hours. You got 40 hours of work or so, maybe more. I don't know, it fluctuates. You got 56 hours of sleep and 72 hours for everything else. And so I'd say that as you reflect on your habits with mobile devices, computers, and so forth, spend your time wisely, put that phone away, hide it, and when you're working, do something reasonable. So that's up to you to figure out, and have a good day. See you guys. Thank you. All right. Great. I got time for questions up front if you got more for me. See you later.